With us as we are working our way slowly through the opening chapters of Genesis 1 to 3. So we're on page 4 this morning of the church Bibles, and over the past Sundays we have been discovering again God's blueprint for the world that He made. His blueprint for His world, His blueprint for His people, and this week our focus settles at the end of chapter 2 on human relationships, and in particular on marriage. Now, as we begin to start thinking about these verses and think about marriage in particular, I think it's probably fair to say that we do so against a backdrop of some confusion. I think there's confusion in the world around us at the moment. Here's a headline from the Times newspaper last weekend, that bastion of respectability. It was a book review and it was entitled "The Ultimate Guide to Polyamory Without Heartbreak." More and more Britons are exploring relationships with multiple partners. Luckily, there's a book on how to keep all partners happy. It's not just a one-off. Here's a headline from the Times from 3 weeks ago. Room for three, the truth about polyamory. A new study suggests that 1/3 of straight men are open to the idea of more than one long-term partner. To which I would add, in brackets as a sub-headline, colour me surprised. Increasingly, marriage is seen as retrograde, as a little bit out of date, perhaps even repressive, a legacy of a patriarchal world that we are better off just leaving behind and getting rid of. And given all that, it's no surprise that fewer and fewer people are getting married. So research published by the think tank Civitas at the end of 2022 suggests that on current trends, rates of marriage will drop by 70% in the next 40 years. So rates that have been steadily declining over the past 20 or 30 years are about to fall off a cliff. But there's not just confusion in the world around us, there's confusion about marriage and singleness in the church. I'm sure I don't need to say much about the Church of England at this point. You've probably all been following along with the recent headlines. But whatever your views on sexuality, I think everyone is probably agreed that the Church of England is in a mess on this particular issue. But closer to home, it seems to me that churches that most of us have encountered and been a part of over the past few years are also confused and are particularly prone to doing one of two things. Some churches, perhaps in response to all of that confusion in the world around and the direction of travel more broadly, give an undue weight to marriage, put marriage up on a pedestal, almost kind of make marriage synonymous with the promises and the hope of the gospel. So I encountered a few weeks ago a discussion online. I mean, you can find anything online, can't you? So maybe this doesn't count. But I encountered a discussion between two pastors who were talking about the kind of the missional context that we're in at the moment in the kind of 21st century in the West. And his view was that our best hope for mission at the moment is that Christians should have more children. That's where our hope is, that we are going to have lots and lots of children, and that's going to be the way that the West is going to be one again. Others, however, respond not by putting marriage on a pedestal, but I think by being a little bit embarrassed about marriage. And kind of say, well, nothing really about it ever, apart from it's a good thing for those who are fortunate enough to find someone who will marry them, but kind of not much more than that. If you're married, great, hooray, well done for you, but that's about it. The problem is, I think, that leaves a huge amount unsaid, a huge amount of good things unsaid. Recently, as I've been thinking about this whole area, one of the books that I've been reading is by this book by a journalist and campaigner called Louise Perry. She's not a Christian, it's really important to say that, but she takes a very hard, cold look at where the sexual revolution has left women in particular. And towards the end of her book, this is what she says, kind of as she's wrapping up and nearly in conclusion. She says, we need a technology that discourages short-termism in male sexual behavior, protects the economic interests of mothers, and creates a stable environment for the raising of children. And we do already have such a technology, even if it's old, clunky, and prone to periodic failure. It's called monogamous marriage. Now, my intention this week is not to touch any raw nerves. It's not to offend or to create guilt. And neither is it my intention to play into the narrative that the church is obsessed about marriage. I've been here at St Barnabas for nearly 3 years, and this is the first time that I have preached on marriage and singleness. If you are here this morning visiting, you've arrived on what's quite an unusual Sunday for us. But because we live in a time of increased confusion about marriage and relationships, what we need, I think, more than ever, is to hear Jesus' words. I think we need to know what he thinks and what he says about marriage, because his commands, the things that he tells us, including his teaching about marriage, is life-giving. It's given for our good. It's given so that we would thrive as human people, which is not to say at all that his commands are easy. It's not that it's going to be an easy thing for us to follow him, but what he commands is good. So as much as the passages that we've read today might sound deeply offensive to modern ears, the teaching of the Bible has been tried and tested by millions and millions of people down the centuries and across many, many different cultures, and it's been found to be good. In fact, what I hope we'll see this week and next week is actually that marriage is captivating. It's not something for us to be embarrassed about, but it's captivating, whether we are single or whether we are married. And that's because marriage is what we are all created for. We are all going to enjoy the ultimate marriage, the one marriage that will last into eternity. And that experience of marriage is going to delight each and every person who is caught up in it for all eternity. That's our hope in marriage. And this morning in Genesis chapter 2, we begin to be pointed in that direction. There are 3 foundational truths about human relationships and marriage in particular in Genesis 2 that I want us to notice this morning. First, we need to see the purpose of marriage. The purpose of marriage. Marriage is designed to serve the purposes of God. Marriage is designed to serve the purposes of God. So just a brief recap on what we've seen so far in Genesis. So back in chapter 1, we saw that God is the creator of all things, that we're all living in the world that he has made. And we paused on day 6 for a couple of Sundays as human beings were created. If you're around, you might remember the end of Genesis chapter 1. Human beings, male and female together, are created with unique dignity, created in the image of God, and created with a unique purpose, created for dominion in the world that God has made, tasked with filling and subduing the entire created order, creating more image bearers so that the world will be full of the knowledge of the glory of God. Genesis 2 gives us the creation story from another perspective, from the perspective of relationship. You remember that we saw the key words last Sunday in Genesis 2, that it's all about the Lord, the personal name of God, that we've been created for relationship with God. We saw that the man was placed in Eden, getting to work in the garden, taking care of it and keeping it, and doing so in relationship with God, fulfilling his vocation, working in the garden and taking care of it. Which means that we get to verse 18 and the first verse of our reading, and we get something of a surprise. For the first time in 2 chapters, for the first time so far, God says, it is not good. Something in his creation is not good. It's not good, verse 18, for the man to be alone. Notice that God doesn't say it's not good for the man to be lonely, which should be an indication to us that marriage isn't a solution first and foremost for loneliness here. That's not what is going on in Genesis 2. It's not that Adam is deeply lonely and needs a companion who will meet his emotional needs. Friends, this might come as a surprise to some of us. There are quite a number of married people who are lonely. We're quite wrong if we're married or if we're single, but whatever our relationship status, if we expect that one other person is going to meet all of our emotional and relational needs, we're placing far too much weight on one single relationship. God doesn't say it's not good for the man because he's lonely. It's not good for the man to be alone. And his aloneness is a problem because it means that the man cannot fulfill the purpose that God has for humanity. That purpose that we saw back in chapter 1, to fill the earth with more image bearers and to subdue it. I think that's underlined by it feels like a bit of an odd interlude, doesn't it? The kind of naming of the animals thing in verses 18 and 19. There's that slightly odd interlude, but here is the man exercising his dominion. He's acting in a godlike way. He's naming the animals, but none of the animals that he names can give him the help that he needs to do any more than name them. It's a start to his kind of God-given role in creation, but it's not all of it. It's no more than a start. The man needs a helper. And in the arrival of the woman, he is given the right match in verse 19 and, in verses 20 and 21. Now, the word helper literally means like opposites. That's the kind of sense of the Hebrew word that is translated helper. The woman is like the man. We're supposed to notice that. She is made of exactly the same substance. If I can put it this way, she is exactly the same kind of thing that the man is. But she's also different. Like or opposite means not the same. Alike, but not exactly similar. And I think it's really hard for us, in fact, I know it's really hard for us, not to read the word helper as implying inferior. We have decades of accumulated baggage with this narrative that I'm not going to undo in 20 minutes this morning. But just notice that consistently through the scriptures, it is God himself who is called the helper of his people. And more than once, God's help and being the helper of his people comes in the context of military aid. So Deuteronomy 33:26, there is none like the God of Israel who rides through the heavens to your help. Same word. Psalm 33, verse 20, our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. Same word again. We might find this text difficult and the creation narrative demeaning because to our ears it seems to imply inferiority. The ancients would have found it shocking because it implies equal dignity between man and woman, between male and female. The man and woman are alike. They are of the same substance. They are the same kind of thing. Alike but not the same, both created to serve God, but not serving him interchangeably. Men and women together are created to make God known. Now, things work differently today, particularly when I think we come to the question of what it means to make God known and to be making him known in his world. So clearly in Genesis chapters 1 and 2, that making God known particularly means children. and particularly means bringing more image bearers into the garden. But in the coming of Jesus, things take a different shape. Marriage is still the proper place for bringing children into the world. It still finds its right end in bringing more gardeners into the garden to the glory of God. But in the coming of Jesus, making God known in the world isn't about procreation, but is all about the gospel, making Jesus known through the work of the gospel. So marriage finds its ultimate purpose there, serving God in his world by making him known to his glory. That is the purpose of marriage. That's the purpose of marriage. Verses 21 to 25 lay out a pattern for marriage. Because after his fruitless search amongst the animal kingdom, the man lays his eyes on the woman, and at long last, creation is complete. So verses 22 and 23. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." It's a poem of celebration and rejoicing that at long last, creation is finally made whole and complete. It is what it should be, fully and delightfully. Here at last, says the man, is the one who will share with me in the work of carrying out God's purposes in the world, the work of making him known, the work of bringing glory to him as he is made known in all of his creation. So the man and the woman are brought together in a joyful union. So verse 24, for this reason, the narrator tells us, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. So now we've moved, do you see, from male and female, man and woman, to man and wife. And the narrator tells us that what we have just seen going through verses 18 to 23 are the reason for marriage. That this is a union that's formed to serve the purposes of God in his world. Notice three dimensions of that union. Firstly, it's a public union. A union, a new bond is created that redirects primary loyalties. A man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. I think in the kind of old currency, that was called leaving and cleaving. The idea that actually one particular family bond has come to an end or has been reshaped, and a new one that supersedes it is created in marriage, leaving and cleaving. Notice too that it is a lifelong union. So where we see in verse 24 that a man leaves his father and mother to be united to his wife, some translations translate united as the phrase hold fast to his wife, which implies that this is not a union that's going to come to an end for any human reason, apart from death. This is intended to be a lifelong union. And it's also a union that brings together difference. It's a union in which a man and a woman are brought together. So all the way through the Genesis accounts, if you think back as far as Genesis chapter 1, the narrator has told us all about pairs of opposite things that are interwoven into creation. So we've heard about day and night. We've heard about waters above and waters below. We've heard about sea and dry land. There are pairs of things that form and bring structure to God's created world. But those pairs are brought together. They function together. The heavens and the earth, we're told at the beginning of chapter 2, were completed in their vast array. So those different pairs of things come together to make up God's creation. And the same pattern exists in marriage. Marriage is like a microcosm of creation. There is difference. Man and woman are not the same, and yet they are brought and paired together, male and female brought together. And it's in this union that we find the God-ordained context for a sexual union. Sex is God's idea. It's his gift to the man and the woman, and the one flesh act belongs in the one flesh union. The two go together. It's really important, I think, to say that God is not embarrassed about sex. The church often is in all sorts of ways, but God isn't. It's his idea, it's his creation, it's his gift. Here's what Yves, the Bishop of Chartres, taught about sex in the 10th century. Part of his teaching said Christians should abstain from sex on Thursdays in memory of the arrest of our Lord, on Fridays in honour of his death, on Saturdays in honour of the Virgin Mary, on Sundays in commemoration of the resurrection, and on Mondays out of respect for the faithfully departed. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are kind of your window, really, aren't they? In which case, thank God it's Tuesday. There isn't any hint of that attitude here. The man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. We've seen all the way through Genesis 1 and 2 that God thinks material things are good. He creates the material world, and he blesses it, and he says, this is good. And he creates human bodies, and he blesses them and says, this is good. This is a good thing. The man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Marriage has a purpose. It has a pattern. Lastly, it has a fulfillment. And I think the purpose and the pattern work together to point us towards the fulfillment of marriage. Human marriage points beyond itself to the marriage of Christ and the church. The way that Christians think about marriage, the way that the Bible encourages us to think about marriage, is to think that this thing that we see that's part of our created world is about that. This is about that. This is a kind of foretaste or a pointer towards that. Genesis 2:24 is quoted 4 times in the New Testament. We read Ephesians 5 earlier. The Apostle Paul takes Genesis 2:24 and he says that ultimately marriage is all about the relationship between Jesus and his people, that this means that. How is it that that works? Well, you probably know the next chapter of the story in Genesis. In Genesis 3, we will read that although God created humanity to live in the blessing of relationship with him, human beings have turned away from him, which has brought ruin into the world and ruin into our relationships. Which means that everyone here this morning comes to the issue of sex and relationships with all kinds of baggage. Genesis 3 will tell us next week, or in 2 weeks' time, that we've all got it wrong and that we all carry a degree of guilt and shame. Now, for some of us, that might be a kind of guilt that we carry as a result of how we've been treated by others, particularly if we've experienced abuse, sexual, emotional, physical, of any kind. But all of us will know that we've made mistakes here, that we're not the people that we should be, that we carry enormous baggage with us. And because of the power that sex and relationships have in our lives and in our world, some of us might be asking, as a result of that, is it possible that God could ever have me back? Have I put myself beyond the reach of his grace? If God knew what I have done, what would he make of me? But it's precisely at this point that the reality that marriage points us towards is wonderful news. Because the story of the Bible is the story of a God who acts in mind-blowing, nearly incomprehensible love. It's the story of a marriage, a God who takes on flesh, comes into the world, dies the shameful death of a slave, plunges himself down to the depths of hell, and rises to new life in order to prepare a table for his bride and to make his bride ready for that wedding feast. The Bible story ends with a wedding feast in Revelation chapter 2. And as such, it tells us that Jesus knows what he's getting into, and he doesn't hold himself back. The promises that he has made to his bride, he won't ever break. His loyalty to his bride won't ever come to an end. In Christ, we find forgiveness and love. The love that each one of us was made to know and to experience. The love that we were made for. We find ultimately and completely and beautifully and wonderfully in him. No matter our past, no matter what we think we have done, no matter what we think might have put us beyond his reach. So even with all of their clunky imperfections, human marriages point us towards that marriage which is our future, which is our hope, which will one day be our glory. Let me leave a moment of quiet for us to reflect, and then I'm going to pray.